Empty the chamber on them. And how do you do that? First 6 seconds, point A to point B, everything you got. Everything you got. Turn that shit up. Let's go.
Welcome to Scoop World Order. It is Sunday night. We are 1 month away from spring football at Ohio State University, the start of the Kyle McCord era or the Devin Brown era. Super excited about that. We have a ton of stuff to go over. We're going to break down some of the key matchups and the key battles for positions that are going to be up for grabs during spring football. Nevadabuck will join us shortly. We have a ton to go on. We're going to break down some film. Some Carson Hinzman film. That's the guy that I think is squarely in the crosshairs as we get into spring ball. Justin Fry obviously announced that initially the two starting guards will be Donnie Jackson and Matt Jones. I think that is interesting, but I also think that could change very easily based on the performance of the guys. But obviously behind the scenes and through winter practice, there are some guys making some noise. Carson Hinzman obviously would be the incumbent leader to be the starting center for Ohio State this year. Vic Cutler is going to push him. That is the kid that came in from Louisiana Monroe, a kid that played against Bama. Played tackle. I don't love the fact that he was a left tackle. I think that when you're going down inside into center guard, it's a plugger spot. You got to have leverage. You're going against guys that are heavier, generally shorter. Just watching his tape, be interesting to see how he holds up, how strong he is, how good of an anchor he has on the interior. I think that Carson Hinzman was the number one center in the country 2 years ago. Can he become this year's Luke Whippler? Luke Whippler was a kid that many people didn't know. James Yoder actually had kind of a funny thing, a funny hoodie made about who would buy a Luke Whippler NIL hoodie, and then Luke Whippler going into training camp in 2021. Projected to be a backup, play sparingly, and Harry Miller, basically retired from football during training camp. So all of a sudden, Luke goes from being a redshirt freshman who nobody was really worried about or really concerned about to the guy that literally started at center and did a fantastic job. Stacked that first year onto a second year, and became a guy that is a very, very rare 3-and-out center for Ohio State. I can't remember the last guy that's left early after 3 years. We had Billy Price stay 5. He won the Remington, was first-team All-American. Pat Elflein won the Remington, was a first-team All-American. Michael Jordan was a first-team All-American. He left early. He played his last year at center. So Luke going off to the draft, it kind of leaves us shuffling a little bit. I wouldn't say reeling. I know a lot of people are concerned about the offensive line, but to me, if you're a college football coach, this is just part of the gig. Like, you're going to have to replace guys like Paris and guys like DeWand. And then, you're going to have a little bit of a change up where a kid like Luke Whippler declares early. And I think that when you're a guy like Justin Fry and you're, the young GA and you're Brian Hartline, the OC, and Ryan Day and Mickey Marotti, that whole village needs to work to get that O-line right. Because you look around, the skill is incredibly deep. There's a ton of talent across the board, especially deep at receiver, running back. A lot of these guys. The one thing I love about the spring ball, just based on Ryan Day's initial injury report and the number of guys that are out for all of spring. Emeka is out. Julian Fleming's out. I'm sure Marvin Harrison will barely do anything just because he's already the guy. He's already the best receiver in the country, so they don't want to do anything to risk injury. So for some of these young guys that are going into year 2, 3, and then some of the really young guys like the Rogers brothers, Carnell Tate, they're going to get some reps at probably a higher starting point than normal. Normally, if a kid like Carnell Tate come in, he'd be running with the 3s exclusively. But, when you're missing your top 2 receivers, you're going to limit Marvin Harrison's reps. All of a sudden, Carnell could be a day one starter with the 2s, and some of these guys from the 2022 class that didn't do much last year, Caleb Burton, Kojo, some of these guys are going to be pushed up into that first crew. Jaden Ballard, I can't imagine there's a guy on this team that'll get or should get more reps than Jaden Ballard, because you really got to figure out what you have with Jaden Ballard. He's a guy that was flashing during bowl practice. A lot of people talked about how explosive he was, game plan. I mean, we had people in practice watching saying, oh, watch out for this guy against Georgia. And per usual, we get to the game and doesn't even play. I mean, and I don't know if there's a trust thing there, or if there's a performance or something off the field. I'm not sure. But when a guy like that is shining in practice and then has no role on game day, essentially, not even to be a rotational guy, to give some of those guys like Julian Fleming and some of those guys a blow. Even after Marvin got hurt, like he didn't come in the game. So that was always fascinating, interesting. So it'll be interesting to see how much he works. Does he work at the Z? Does he work at the X? How much work does Marvin get? Which I really don't care if he does anything in the spring. I hope he sits out and just, sits in a lawn chair and is on the jugs machine the whole time. So it'll be interesting. But as always, we appreciate you guys. It's Sunday night. We know there's a lot of stuff you guys to watch right now. Slower time in the year, obviously, with football being done. There are 4 quarters of football left for the year, but we are racing towards spring ball, so it is all good. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Click that like button. We're going to start taking your questions. Additionally, if you've not subscribed to this channel, please click subscribe. Those are huge for us. Comment. I want to hear it. Where are you guys from? Shout out where you're from. I get a download every week of the locations you guys watch from. We have people basically on every continent except for Antarctica watching. So we appreciate you guys for that. Thank you guys so much. Shout out where you're from. And I need a name. Give me a name in the comments. Who needs to step up? Is it Carson Hinzman? Give me an obscure name. Obviously, everyone's gonna say McCord, Devin Brown. That's the big money spot is quarterback. But I need to know, who do you think is going to step in at a different spot? Is it an obscure defensive tackle? Is it Hero Kanu? Is it Kenyatta Jackson at defensive end? Is it Obari Abor? A lot of guys need to step up. There's a lot of open spots, not just as starters, but as rotational guys coming off the bench. We lost some good depth guys. Not a lot of super high end guys, especially on defense, but a lot of depth guys. So it's going to be interesting to see where guys start off in spring, where they finish spring, how the summer goes. And again, nothing is ever final until really the end of the season. I know that sounds crazy, but going into week 1, we thought Josh Proctor was going to be our adjuster safety, our free safety, and Lathan Rantham was going to come off the bench. Lathan replaces Josh after the first drive, and then from there, it was nothing but the Lathan Ransom show. So with that being said, we're going to head into the film room, put a little Carson Hinzman on while we're sitting here. I'm going to take some of your questions as well. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what and who needs to step into the roles as we're moving along. Let me get my little studio thing set up. Appreciate you guys. Let me get some of these questions going too. There we go. So this is Carson Hinzman, Wisconsin kid, not great high school football. Banging kids here though, so it's always interesting to kind of watch that, because we've got some really some eclectic things. Like, I think that there wasn't a shot that we were ever going to get this kid when we were, when there's a Wisconsin offensive lineman that is good, it's almost impossible to get him out of Madison. I mean, I just feel like, there's a kid this year that's a 2024. It's going to be a fist fight to get that kid, especially now that Luke Fickell's up there. They're more stabilized. But, Wisconsin kids that are good go to Wisconsin. Give me 1 second. I'm going to add Nevadabuck to our conference. Nevada, you there? We are live right now, so welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here. I see guys playing in the background. Who's playing?
This is Carson Hinzman. So we're just talking a little bit about position battles between some of these spots. He's a kid that it's really interesting when Justin Fry says that he's not going to run Matt Jones at center, which kind of shocked me. And it's going to be Carson Hinzman versus Victor Cutler. Obviously, if you're handicapping this, I'd put Carson Hinzman as a pretty heavy favorite, just given the fact that he has been in the system for a year. He was the number 1 center in the country 2 years ago. He's basically going to be the same age as Luke Whippler, who redshirted last year, joined the fray, got into the battle, and then ended up, when Harry Miller retired, became a really good center, a 3-and-out center. I think Carson potentially could be that, but I just, again, it's hard when these guys haven't played, and you hear things from practice, but you just got to go back and watch what made him the number 1 center in the country when Greg Stroud got his commitment. It was interesting because when he was at the Army All-American game, he actually got informed that Greg Stroud got fired while he was practicing down there. Obviously, Justin Fry kept he had already signed his letter of intent in December, but But now Justin gets a chance to develop him, and obviously I think he's doing good things if he is actually leaving Matt Jones at guard. Like again, I thought that was shocking, especially given the fact that Enoch Vamahi started the Michigan game, and when they went through kind of the depth and the kind of the nickel version of starters that Ryan Day did, he had Zen out, Tegra. Not as much mention of Enoch. I figured Enoch would be the day one right guard and Matt would be the center, and you'd have a little bit more veteran presence. It'd be interesting to see how much they rotate that and how much that changes. Then again, the day one starters don't really mean anything, but what is your take on that? And what are some of the position battles in spring ball that you're looking forward to following?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of Carson. I think Carson's a guy that just hasn't had his chance. Like, I've heard lots of good things about him. I mean, when you watch his tape, one thing that jumps out is, I mean, he likes to finish his blocks, and he plays nasty, and he plays hard, and he's an aggressive kid. And people just have to remember with offensive linemen, sometimes guys just need to have their chance. We've said it many, many times. Corey Lindsley didn't start a game until his fourth year in the program. If Harry Miller hadn't had his issues, Luke Whipper would be a giant unknown right now. I mean, we could go through the list, many, many times in terms of doing it. But I think the offensive line battles they're just going to be so fun to watch because, we could do an entire show just talking about possible offensive line combinations with, is Mikowski out there at left tackle? Does Donnie Jackson eventually move out there? Does Cutler play center? Does Matt Jones play center? Does Hinzman play? Where does Enoch fit into this? I mean, we've got so many different options on the offensive line. I just think that's going to be really, really fun to watch. But, between the offensive line, shifting around, the safety battle to me is going to be the next thing that's going to be the most interesting because you've got kind of this Rubik's Cube of all these experienced guys coming back. You've got some guys in the transfer portal, coming into the room. And then you've got some young guys like, your CJ Hicks or your, Sonny Styles that have got to find the, and the famous Kai Stokes or Sonny Stokes or Kai Styles or whatever you want to call them. These guys have got to find a way onto the field. So I think those battles are going to be just as interesting. So it's got some on the offensive side, some on the defensive side, but lots of good things in spring ball. And with some guys sitting out, it's going to give opportunities for some other people to play. So I can't wait.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how Josh Proctor mixes in a guy that basically nobody thought was going to come back, and then magically he came back. I mean, people thought he'd transfer, maybe try the draft, but now he's back in the mix. And how does that affect where you put Sonny? How does it affect? Obviously Lathan's going to be where he is. He's a preseason All-American free safety. But where do you put the other guys? Kai Stokes, Sonny Styles, a lot of guys ready to go. So it's going to be fascinating. I think safety, corner, like the whole secondary is going to be fascinating. I think the D-line rotation got drained a little bit, losing Jerron, Teron, Zach. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that good players. I mean, obviously Zach Harrison's likely first, second round pick, depending on how he tests. I think that when you look at Amari Abor, Kenyatta, some of these guys got to step up and play and be pass rush threats. Again, Paul Buckeye, as always, I'm going to toss your question on here. I agree. I think Jack Sawyer is a guy that really needs to take a big step. I think that Jack, even though he led the team he's in a weird spot because he led the team in sacks, 4.5 sacks, but he doesn't get talked of in the same breath that JT does. And JT actually had fewer sacks with significantly more plays played, which to me, and sacks aren't the end all be all. I think there's a lot of things that go into playing defensive end. I know sacks are what get you into the Pro Bowl and make you for a number one overall pick, but I think just pass rush wins, quarterback hits. How much do you affect the opposing offense's blocking scheme is always important to me because, again, when you watch Chase Young in 19, literally, and I mean, you can literally see a triple team from Illinois where it's a tackle, a tight end, and a fullback blocking him, and then that just means that guys like Jonathan, or Coop didn't play that year, excuse me, but like if you got Coop or you got Baron Browning or whoever, someone has to go win on the other side because they're going to be wound up and not be paying attention. So again, like I think sacks are important, but I also am from the camp as an offensive line guy that if you're going against Myles Garrett and that guy gets 3 or 4 sacks on you, then you should fire the offensive line coach and the offensive coordinator because you can't let that guy beat you. If Clowney beats you or one of the other pass rushers on the team beats you, that's fine. But you got to identify the guy who's the best guy and block him. And I thought we did a good job on Jalen Carter in the Georgia game. That was the guy that everyone was scared of and worried about, in the top 2-3 pick in the draft, and he made no impact against us. And that was because we had a good scheme. Our guys played well, and we mixed it up. Again, like calling, and this is something that Brian Hartline is going to have to learn fast, because not all pass protections are created equal. The flow and the scheme of the game, from an offensive line protection, it's a lot like pitching. If you throw a fastball every time, you're probably going to get dusted and cut and designated for assignment. But if you mix it up and you throw some junk and you throw gas, and then you throw a cutter, whatever, then all of a sudden you're a lot harder to hit. And that's what it's like to be a good pass protection team, like we were against Georgia. So, Nevada, what else do you have? Your thoughts on Sawyer? Who are some guys in your mind that you think could take that next step from year 1 to 2 or year 2 to 3, and really move from just being guys to being potential All Big Ten and fringe All American guys?
Well, before I get into that, I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question about a guy that played at Ohio State just in the recent past, and to me was always out of position, goes to the NFL. They play him in a different position, and he becomes one of the most impactful players in all of professional football. And I'm talking about Baron Browning. How can a guy like that not? I believe that they lined him up at that that rush end spot, or whatever you want to call it, whatever fancy name you want to call it. I think they did it like one time. I think it was against Alabama, and he had a big sack. I think he caused a turnover against Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. But how does that happen? I really am asking the question: how does a team like Ohio State miss something like that? Because clearly he has found a home at that rush end position in the NFL. He's setting all sorts of advanced analytic records for pressures and hits and contacts. And but how does that happen? You played, you coached. How does something like that slip through the cracks?
I think sometimes, coaches kind of get tunnel vision with their guys. Baron Browning's a guy that played a lot of linebackers. So, what room was he sitting in? Was he sitting in with Bill Davis? Was he with Fickle? Was he, where was he sitting? And then when it comes to pass rush time, those are premium snaps in the game where your best defensive ends really want the opportunity to rush the quarterback and get their sacks. They all want to get to what they call double-digit sacks. And I remember specifically in 2019, they deployed a package that had Chase off one edge. It was a bear package. It was 3 down linemen in the middle, Chase on one side, and it had Barron on the other side, like both on outside shoulders of tackles. And I remember I broke that down on CBS, wall-to-wall sports on 10 TV. And I was like, this is so impossibly hard to go against. It's hard to scheme against when you have 2 guys that are legit 4-5 guys or 4-4 guys coming off the edge. And then, you can blitz a guy in the middle that has speed, and they were just wrecking shop. And I was like, you have to do this. Because again, when an offensive line and a scheme, all the schemes in 2019 were designed to stop Chase Young. So when you put somebody on the other side of the field who isn't quite Chase Young, but he's really good, and he's a guy that's probably going to get a significant extension when he hits free agency with the Broncos, then he can feast and just go absolutely bonkers. And when they ran that, it was kind of my inspiration for getting a Jumbotron and getting a telestrator on here, is because I could literally draw up, like, look at the types of issues that these bring to the protection schemes. Like, what do? Do you turn these guys and then they bring a guy up the gut? It was like, Georgia did some stuff against us that I was like, wow, that is really, really tough. Because again, I just judge everything by, when we give up a sack, a pressure, a negative play, whatever, why? Is it a technique thing? Did we blow an assignment? Did somebody fall down? Did somebody trip? Whatever. And I'm not saying that exclusively to Ohio State. That happens in NFL conference title games. Like, that happens across football where, when people get sacks or negative plays, like, what happened? Was there a misguided call or something? And Georgia ran some stuff, man, where I was like, that is so hard to pass off the games in the middle of the field. They really attacked the middle of our offensive line in that game. They didn't really go at the tackles as much, because the tackles were our best players. But, man, they ran some good stuff, especially at the end of the game. They ran the same thing a couple times, and it got us. But, I think that sometimes there's if I'm your coach and you're my very good defensive end, and you play on rundowns, you're Nevadabuck, the 3-star, 4-star defensive end coming off the edge, but you're not a great pass rusher. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, you know what? You got to sit the snap out. You can go do the stuff that sucks. You can go play the runs and the double teams and get kicked out by some big fat 330-pound guard. But when it comes time to make your money on a pass rush, I'm going to go get this linebacker who's way better than you. And again, is that being a team player? Is that being whatever? But, these guys, again, I know it's the brotherhood and all this other, like, whatever, but these guys all want to get theirs. Those guys all want to go to the league. And, if you're Jack Storage, JT Tumalel, like, you're shooting for 10 sacks, and it's hard to get sacks, in some spots. Teams get rid of the ball quick against us. But, I think that there's just that, how do I look my guy in the eye who's in my defensive line room, not a great pass rusher, but he does everything I want, and say, hey, when it's time for you to have fun, you have to come stand next to me, and we're going to put Barron down there because he's a lot more productive than you. So I think that that's part of what it is. And honestly, let's just be realistic. Some of Larry Johnson's rotations, and I love Larry Johnson. I've known him since I was in 9th grade, and I've always respected him. I played against his D-lines. His D-lines are always really hard to go against, really, really well coached, really good technically, gave really high effort. And that was all a reflection of him. But some of his rotations have just been terrible. And again, I'm not afraid to criticize a guy who's a Hall of Fame type coach, but I don't understand why some guys get 60 snaps and some guys get 10 snaps. And the guys that get 10 snaps have more production and higher efficiency than the guys that get 60 snaps. And it's not even close. So I don't know. I know that was probably a long-winded answer, but I think some of it is like a political thing inside your room where, if you pull out your guy, again, it's kind of like the running back, like when you have like the bell cow big dude, or the guy that it's like in Varsity Blues, the guy that like gets you down to the end zone or gets you down in the short red area, like the 5-yard line going in, and then you bring in like Mike Allstott or whatever, and he vultures your touchdown. That's kind of what it's like. Baron Browning has a chance to vulture your sack because you get it to 3rd and 9, and then all of a sudden you have to come off the field, and the vulture comes in and gets to rush the quarterback. I guess that's the closest thing I really can compare it to.
That's a fascinating answer. I had never heard. I mean, it makes sense. I get it. I'd never really kind of heard it that way, and because I looking at this.
Nevada has accidentally muted himself, so let's get him back in here. He's gonna call back in. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and for a lot of you guys that have coached sports or you've played sports, you guys get what I'm talking about. There's guys that are there's players that you're fond of as a coach, guys that don't give you any grief. They give a lot of effort, but when it comes go time, I mean, you gotta do what's in the best interest of the team. And Baron Browning was a fantastic passer. He was a guy that I thought was undervalued. I think that he wasn't a guy that could be an every down defensive end just because he wasn't quite heavy enough. He'd get beat up by some of the bigger Big Ten tackles. But I also think that, from a pass rush perspective, like it's a 3rd down guy. I mean, he was really good. But yeah, I think that when you have guys that can't turn the corner as well, but they're your guys that you have to look in the eyes every day, it's tough. Again, I played in the NFL. I know how stat cognizant guys are, especially guys like defensive ends, defensive tackles, because they they know that their livelihood is tied to getting sacks. So when you're an NFL defensive end, like you're not going to last real long if you're a DN and you're getting 1 sack a year or 2 sacks a year. Like you got to get 4, 5, 6. If you want to go to the Pro Bowl, you got to hit 12, 13, 14. If you want to get a good extension in free agency, you got to hit 10. So, and college football is no different. So, Nevada, I was just going through kind of, the like defensive end guys they're very numbers driven just because sacks are just so overpowered. They're so important when it comes to their evaluations from scouts and coaches. And why did you only have 2 sacks? And you played, 600 plays, and, what's that about or whatever. But go ahead and finish your thought real quick.
Well, I just saying, like Sonny Styles. I mean, is Sonny Styles is he Baron Browning? Is he a rush end that could come in and make a big impact for Ohio State? Coming in and bending around the corner, and getting to the quarterback. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And I mean, because I always look at, when does history repeat itself? And you're looking for a way to kind of get this guy on the field, and maybe it's situationally, maybe it's packaged. But I mean, to have a guy who's that big and long and with that kind of athleticism and that kind of speed, wouldn't he just be wreaking havoc coming off the edge?
Yeah. I mean, I remember, when we were at the Woody Hayes and he was at camp and he was working with Larry Johnson and working pass rush moves. I was like, wow. I mean, if I was that kid, I would, if you're going to move into linebacker, the linebackers that get paid are the ones that can rush the passer. It's not the guys that are just run pluggers that are 2 down guys. It's guys that can get after the quarterback on 3rd down. And I watched him bend, because again, people don't talk enough about bending and flexibility and being able, but you go watch Nicky Bosa and go watch Joey, like 80% of their workout routine is stretching, because they have to be like, elastoman to be able to get around the corner, get to the quarterback, get their hand on the ball, force a fumble. And that's something that, like, some guys just naturally have. A lot of guys have to work at it. Some guys don't. And some guys that have natural bend can then work at it and they can have like superhuman bend. And Sonny's a guy that's like that. Cause again, I remember they worked him out with Larry after practice and I was like, whoa. I was like, I think that, you could see the vision of what they would want him to do as he got to maybe weigh 235. I mean, that's plenty of weight to come off the edge. I think that, some of the stuff that Georgia did that I loved, these middle pressures, basically simulated pressures where they're bringing 5, they're mixing guys in the middle of the field, crossing guys over, and then like the second guy, it's something that I'm just gonna have to draw it to show it to you guys. Sonny Styles would be absolutely perfect for it. Like, he's a guy that I would literally, I don't know if I'd want to take Tommy off the field, but Tommy's a guy, like, he can run. I don't know if he can run like Sonny. And it would give Sonny a role. Because that's the thing that with some of these guys that are big time guys with Proctor back and Sonny and Kai, like, you got to find roles for some of these guys. You got to keep them engaged. You got to keep them rotating. And, like a guy like Sonny, he's got to have a role in this defense. And I don't know if it's playing nickel. I don't know if it's playing linebacker. CJ Hicks has to have a role. I don't know if that's playing jack. It's got to be more than just, running down and covering a kickoff where they fair catch it every time. But yeah, Sonny.
Well, I mean,
Sonny
I mean, look at. I mean, and again, I hate these comparisons, so I apologize for making this comparison. But Micah Parsons, okay, Micah Parsons,
exactly.
Linebacker at Penn State. Look at him in the NFL. He's a wrecking ball. And while it's he's an every down back, it's primarily rushing the quarterback and getting after creating that kind of pressure with that speed and with that athleticism. And, he's just a mismatch for those offensive linemen. And so I look at a guy like Styles and kind of go, why wouldn't you do that? I mean, you're always, in hockey, you're looking for guys that can kind of contribute situationally. And, even when I coached, football at younger levels, I would look for guys and try to find some sort of role that they could do and perform well, because everybody needs to have kind of a role on the team as opposed to just starters and everybody else that cheers. And,
yeah.
Why couldn't Styles be that guy? Why couldn't he be our Micah Parsons type right there and roll him out there and try to do it? And I know it is kind of, vulturing some of the glory and putting him in some of that spot, but that would be a really effective way to utilize him and get the highest and best use of his personal abilities and really make an impact for an Ohio State team that's been really looking to generate a pass rush. I mean, let's face it, last year, as you pointed out, Jack Sawyer led the team in sacks with 4.5. And most people consider Jack Sawyer's season last year to be an abject failure. If you ask the average public to grade Jack Sawyer on a scale of A to F, I'll bet you the highest grade he would get would be like a C- or something. And he was our leader in sacks. So clearly what we're doing ain't working. So how about change it up? Go with some speedier guys, go with some more athletic guys, go with some guys that have a little bit more bend and see what happens. And I mean, I'd love to hear what people's thoughts are on the board and in the chat on this and what they think. But to me, it makes a whole heck of a lot of sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that we've got some total we've got some guys that are absolute monsters, and we've got some guys that just need to get that. They need to get some burn this year, man. I'm telling you, like that was some of the most disappointing things about the program, and there's not many. I mean, again, you're really nitpicking at this point when you say you're upset with the direction or anything with Ohio State football, but some of the rotations are very questionable. Like I don't know why. Again, Sonny, like I know Sonny's a tough kid because again I've said this on 10 different podcasts where you literally sit there and you see Sonny Styles take on the fullback from Wisconsin on the third play of the game, runs right into him, T-bones him like a it was like a tractor trailer wreck, and he wasn't scared, and he tattooed the guy, and I was like, holy cow, Sonny Styles has arrived, and then all of a sudden it just literally he just didn't play, and I thought he was going to really get rolling up and really become like the next big dude. And for whatever reason, he didn't work into the rotation. I mean, and he played like I'm telling you, the third play against Wisconsin. Wisconsin was highly rated, night game, uh, and I don't know. Like I think that I think it's really important when you're taking these kids in that are highly touted guys to find a role for them. Maybe not in year one, but definitely in year two. Because again, like guys like CJ Hicks, guys like Sonny Styles, in the era of the portal, and this isn't, I'm not sparking any rumors or any crazy talk, but it's like, these guys have to be engaged because let's face it, they're going to be getting hit up by other programs that offered them. There's going to be, whispers in the back alleys of how they do this stuff. And you got to keep these guys engaged. And again, that's not to spark a rumor or do anything crazy like that, but that's just the era that we live in. So, I'm figuring out a package for CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles to rush the quarterback as blitzers, or they're my designated, super duper blitzers, or they're part of the rush man or the NASCAR package or whatever. Come up with some funky name for a defensive package for, the whatever, and that's something that you need to just keep in mind. Because again, these kids you're never done recruiting these kids now, which is something that's totally different. I'm going to throw on a 2025 tackle because everybody loves tackles. It's funny, like when I played, nobody loved tackles, and now everybody's obsessed with tackles. This is a kid from Texas, Michael Fasusi. It's really interesting. Bank pointed him out. This is a guy that we really need to watch. Ohio State has a lot of love here from this kid. So he's a kid to pay attention to. This is his sophomore year tape, so he is really thin, really small dude. Not small, but this guy is a guy that's got you could tell right away he's got the thin ankles, little legs, like Trent Williams has really little legs, but super athletic, really nasty, dumps guys on the ground. You guys are going to see on the film, but I mean you could just see in his frame, he's 6'5", 280. They list him at 280, which I don't know if I believe that because he looks like he's about 260-ish. 250-ish. He's playing tackle here, but this is unbalanced, so he's aligned as a tight end. But I like him, and he's a nasty kid, and this is Texas football. This is real football. This isn't Wisconsin football. So I was excited to watch him. I was watching him the other day, and I was like, I'm gonna throw him on here. But this kid's got a lot of upside. Again, at this age, I put a premium on athleticism because you can always make guys stronger, you can always make guys bigger. But it's a lot harder to make guys like into superior athletes. And again, you just always look at like the desire and the drive to finish guys. That's always something I love to see. So, but yeah, your thoughts on kind of rotating guys in Nevada, because that's something that I can't stress enough, that you have to keep these guys engaged because, back in the day, it was just like, I don't know, like guys would kind of be stuck, so you didn't really have to pay as much attention to them. But now, I mean, these guys can, again, we're probably going to have a handful of guys take off after spring ball that aren't happy with their things are. And that's not an Ohio State problem. That's just what college football is now. That'll happen at Bama, Georgia, Florida, Clemson, USC, like everywhere. Guys will be unhappy with their perceived spot on the depth chart and they'll take off. But what are your thoughts on that, Nevada?
Well, I just think, it goes to one of your earlier points about, people wanting to get theirs and stats. I think Ohio State's got to be like, look, we're going to highest and best use for these players. And, like with Chip, they've decided that his highest and best use is in the running back room. He came here to play linebacker. They're saying now he's going to be in the running back room, so he's going to be a running back. Reed Carrico, who came here as a linebacker, I think should probably be a fullback. Sonny Stokes, who came here as a linebacker, probably should be a rush end. I think Ohio State's got to start doing that with these guys and be ruthless about it in terms of putting people out there on the field that generate the most productivity for Ohio State. Statistics be darned, and if people aren't happy with it, then that's one thing. But it's a much worse problem for Ohio State to have talented guys sitting on the sideline because we're afraid of hurting somebody else's feelings or worried about them getting their stats or whatever it might be. I think we've got to create these roles. I know they tried to do it last year. If you remember, they did this kind of funky. We don't have 11 starters on defense. We actually have 15 starters on defense, and you're the starter on the jack package, and you're the starter on the zone monkey package, and you're the starter on the press wedge zero cover bear package. And I think Ohio State tried to do that, but the reality is can they create meaningful roles, and can they do it? We suggested some just some position changes just here on this podcast that I think Ohio State would do well to listen to, because some of the best players at Ohio State that have ever come have switched positions, either from different positions on the same side of the ball or different side of the ball. It's worked out before. Ohio State's got talented guys on the roster, and I think they need to shuffle some things up, and I think it could pay some big dividends for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's going to be interesting to see how we move some guys around. Again, the O-line is the one that really is going to be intriguing to me. Again, I've seen guys, again, it's just because you have the pole position in the race doesn't mean you're going to win the race. The 1 year we had a battle at left guard between Joel Hale and Tony Underwood to be the starting guard, and I think that had to have been in like 16, I think it was maybe 16 or 17. And then the starting guard ended up being Michael Jordan, who started as a true freshman, one of the few true freshmen in the history of the program to start day one. I think Orlando was maybe the other one on the O-line. I mean, start day one as a true freshman on the O-line that's very, very tall cotton. And I believe that it was Michael did it, but he wasn't in the mix. I mean, I think he might have been in town. He was in town for spring ball, I believe. But it was all the talk was Joel Hale, Tony Underwood, two guys that were fifth-year guys, older guys. Joel moved over from D-line. He was a captain. He didn't play at all that year. Really wasn't even a backup, just kind of watched. I think he moved back to D-line eventually, and then Tony just never played. So, I think that the day one lines will change. Obviously, we haven't had many injuries on the O-line, knock on wood, but that can always change things. And I'm not talking about like catastrophic injuries where guys are out for the season or they miss significant time, but you got to understand in spring ball, when you have 15 practices, you can't miss time. You can't have a sprained ankle or a shoulder or a hip flexor or whatever, because that happens. Like guys get dinged up. I mean, my redshirt freshman year, I was in a three-way battle with Tim Schaefer and TJ Downing to be the starting right tackle going into 2004. They were both redshirt sophomores. I was a redshirt freshman, and I had shoulder surgery in the offseason, and it took me a while to get back from that. So I missed some of the beginning of spring ball because it was a pretty decent shoulder surgery. And then I practiced, and like my first week of practice, I sprained my ankle. And it wasn't like I was jogging and sprained it. It was like I got rolled up on and I thought I broke my leg. It was like a very painful sprain, but then I missed the last 2 weeks. I practiced like for 4 days. And so, when that happens, you lose the job. So Tim Schaefer started, I was the backup. TJ moved to guard. And that's just kind of part of it. Like again, like you can't afford to get injured when you're in competition right now. So some of these guys, they got to do everything they can to take care of their bodies. And when you play sports, obviously injuries are part of it. You never wish to be injured. It's one of those things where it's tough when you are injured. But these guys got to gut through it as best they can. They got to take care of their bodies as best they can, because sometimes you could be winning the race and get hurt, and then all of a sudden you allow everybody else to catch up and potentially pass you. So that's always something that's fascinating to monitor when the lower tier guys, because most of the good guys don't do much during spring ball. Like Marvin's not gonna do much in Mecca. But this is a different year with the quarterback thing, because neither of these quarterbacks are anointed, so to speak, the way CJ was last year. So it'll be interesting. Like guys like Trey won't do much. Mine Williams won't do much. This has become even more and more just a thing to audition for the guys that really need it, the guys that haven't been through the battles on Saturdays in the fall, the guys that have watched and now it's their turn to step up and see if they can do it and play. Nevada, your thoughts on that? Because again, I think that's something that people don't realize. Like, and these players again, when I was in the building coaching and whatever, like when there was a competition, I tell these guys, I'm like, look, there's injured and there's hurt, and if you're just hurt, you got to try to go, man. You got to strap up and treat, because you got to treat those practices like games, man, when you're fighting for a spot. But your thoughts on that, Nevada?
Well, I think the underrated point about that right now is you're not only auditioning for Ohio State, but you're auditioning for all these other colleges that are watching spring ball to see who you might potentially go to if in fact it doesn't work out for you at Ohio State. So, these things become, with the additional transfer portal window that's open after spring football, this ball, it's an open tryout for 129 other college football teams. And while as an Ohio State fan, we don't care about that. We don't like that. But it's just something as a fan you just have to be aware of. The guys are out there, they're busting it because they want to make it for Ohio State. But look, it could land you a big NIL transfer deal from another college. It could land you a promised starting spot in another college. It could land you playing time if you're buried on the depth chart. So for Ohio State, they've got to be worried about that as well. And so for guys that are kind of on the fence, maybe they'll put maybe they'll shelve him for spring football because they don't want him to be auditioned out there for these other teams. They don't want him to go off and have the other teams see him and go, wow, we want you to come here. So there's a lot of spy versus spy going on. There's a lot of kind of advanced four-dimensional chess being played here when it comes to spring football, and it never used to be that way. But now in 2023, it's something you have to be thinking about, and as a fan, you just have to be aware about it because it's a reality for sure.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed it last year when they featured G Scott. G Scott was like the focal point of the offense in the spring game. He had 4 or 5 catches, more than he had all season basically. Once the real game started. Evan Pryor was featured, looked really ultra dynamic. He was a guy that people were buzzing about after the game. Thought that he could maybe do, maybe a 1A thing with Trey, and mix mine in obviously, but a guy that people were saying, hey, we got to figure out how to get him 4 or 5 touches a game. And, then of course his ACL obviously going, kind of negated that to start. Nevada, Tony Alford noted that Chip Trevanium, the kid from Hoban, is going to stay at running back. Were you surprised by that at all? I think that in spring, it obviously makes sense because you're going to have Trey's not going to do anything. Mayan's not going to do anything. Evan's probably going to be limited coming off the ACL, even though it's been close to 9-10 months, but I'm sure he'll be limited. Do you think that that's more of a function of the lack of depth in the spring, or do you really think that he's going to have a role along with, Dallin Hayden and they put X back there, Xavier Johnson? What are your thoughts on that? Because that was, I don't want to say that was surprising, but they couldn't really figure out what to do with him at linebacker. And I don't think that linebacker room got any more shallow with Tommy and obviously Steele coming back. But what were your thoughts initially when you heard that?
No, I think you just gave a pretty good summary of it. I think it's a combination of, you've got a linebacker room that, at least for this year, is pretty stout, and we're trying to find roles for guys like Styles and Hicks and some of the guys that are on there, and then you've got a spring, the spring football. I mean, Pryor's not going to play in the spring, and Henderson not going to go, Mayan's not going to go, so you're going to be doing running backs is going to be Dallin on one side and Chip on the other side, and like you said, maybe you can mix in X or one of the walk-ons or whatever it is, but I mean, you just don't have running backs. So I think it was more really a function of that. Those two things combining. I think in the light of those two things, it makes perfect sense for him to stay there at running back. And frankly, I think it's his best position. It's his best opportunity to contribute at Ohio State. And so I think that's probably what happened.
Get Austin Zierveld, Lakota East on. he's in town, so he's ready to go here. He's playing D-end, killing some poor kid. Big athletic kid, a kid that had a Bama offer. So, there's not a lot of those that, Bama they don't come up north very often. So when they offer a kid, obviously we pay attention. It was Bama, Notre Dame, us. We got the commitment. Um, Kid, again, I always tell people, look, I'm always excited about every kid that we sign. And I know that sounds crazy. It sounds stupid. And people say, oh, he's too lowly ranked. Oh, he's too whatever, too big of a project. But I've seen it with my own eyes. I've lived it as a player. I've seen guys that were in my recruiting class that were 5-star guys that showed up, and I couldn't believe that they were 5-star football players because they were so bad. So, and then I've seen guys that off the field issues killed them. Lyrus Rosario was a kid that was probably the highest rated tight end we'll ever sign and have ever signed. We flipped back and forth between the Miami Hurricanes, wanted to be the next Kellen Winslow, comes back here, super athletic kid, really good player in practice, and then off the field issue got suspended during the fall, then got kicked off the team. I mean, just a train wreck. And so again, were people excited when we got Lewis? Of course, Lewis was one of my best friends on the team my freshman year, and then after less than a year, he was gonzo. So again, like when you're in that little world, it's always funny, like with recruiting classes, because everybody comes in together. You think, hey, these are all going to be my best friends. Hey, we're all going to meet each other's weddings. Hey, we're going to, conquer the world. I want a national title together. We're all going to be captains and whatever. But like, you find out real quick that there's a lot of separation that goes on real quick, because there's some guys that they don't go to class. They're not used to going to class. They screw up off the field. There's guys that they are late to workouts. They show up to, there are guys that in my class that showed up to training camp out of shape, and nothing will ever beat the first day of training camp. So Jim Tressel had a poem that he used to read that was about like lions and gazelles. And it was the last thing. And this was like a tradition that I didn't know when I was a freshman, but it was about like the chase of the lion and the gazelle, like the slowest gazelle has to outrun the fastest lion or he dies and gets eaten, and then vice versa. But it's real elegant. I'll find it and I'll post it on the board. But we read that and then we all leave, and we head back to the hotel. This is the check-in day of training camp. The next morning at 6 a.m., which means that you're up at 5 a.m., we run a conditioning test. And Jim Bowman, who I love to death, had no idea. He never told me that we had a conditioning test. And our conditioning test was 20 half gassers. So a half gasser is the width of the field down and back. You have 20 seconds to make it if you're a big guy. If you're a linebacker or a tight end, you have 18 seconds. If you're a little guy, you have 16 seconds. If you're a quarterback, receiver, running back, whatever, and you have 30 seconds rest between each sprint. So that doesn't sound hard, but if you do it, it is really hard. And if you're a guy that hadn't trained for it, which none of us had, I had no idea we had one. But I worked out, I did the little workout plan like to the T twice a day when I was like heading into camp in August. So I was in great shape. I actually crushed the test, but the guys in my class, man, like half the guys failed. And it was unbelievable because they were just so laying on the ground, throwing up. Like, it was so pathetic. And it was like right from that moment, I was like, yeah, I guess not everybody did the summer workouts that they assigned us, did they? So it was just kind of one of those funny things. But it's interesting. Dave, this is a great question. And again, I don't like being overly critical, but when you talk about the captain thing is it's interesting, because we hand out the captaincies a lot now, and again, Nevada, you grew up in a military family, you kind of know what rank is and what it means to be at a certain status or whatever. But what are your thoughts on how it was Urban was the guy that started going kind of crazy with the captains, and then Ryan's he hasn't been quite as crazy as Urban, but what are your thoughts on the captaincy? Does it mean anything anymore at Ohio State to be a captain?
I think it means something, but it certainly doesn't mean as much. I mean, when they did the captain thing the one year where they were rotating the captains every week, remember that one?
When
Like
we had
they
13, we had 13 captains.
Yeah, it was like different captains every
Yeah, I think
week.
that was 2013. We had like 13 captains.
Yeah, and I just think I think all the stuff is well intentioned, but it it's and I hate making lazy takes, but it does kind of feel like the everybody gets a trophy kind of mentality that's kind of seeped into the world a little bit. And unfortunately, I'm one of those people that believe, excellence is excellence, and excellence is earned, and you recognize it. And when people are good, that you recognize it. And if somebody's not good, I do this with my kids. I'm always honest with my kids. If they're good, I tell them that they're good, and if they're bad, I don't tell them they're bad, but I'll tell them what they could do to improve, or what things that need to be worked on. And I'm always honest with them about it. And I just think that the same thing's got to be with the captaincy. So yeah, would I like to see the captaincy be a little bit more exclusive, a little bit more elite, a little bit? I would, but maybe kids have changed. Maybe I'm say the same, and kids have changed in 2023, and maybe that's not the right way to go about it. But I think that's the way that I would do it.
I mean, I agree. I think that, having been a captain, like it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I was a guy that was really private. I kept to myself. I wasn't, a super like outgoing, hey, social butterfly type guy. Like, I kind of had my own little routine. I was in a relationship. I went home. I didn't go out much. I was pretty boring. So, like when you become a captain, though, all of a sudden you have to be a guy that, you do extra stuff. You have to make sure guys, are good, and make sure guys are, if guys need rides home. I used to give Cam Hayward a ride home all the time because I loved Cam. He was a freshman, didn't have a car. We kind of bonded over the fact that we both lost our dads at a relatively young age. And it was tough. But when you get picked to be a captain, when you get voted on to be a captain, as I was, again, it's an extremely double-edged sword, because it's a great honor, and it's something that, you can put on your resume, and you can tell people and say, yeah, he was a captain at Ohio State. But same token, you better play really good. And I mean, that is like another layer of stress that most people don't talk about. Cause I never respected captains that didn't play or didn't play well, or, if you're a captain and you're a running back, you better be all Big Ten, fringe All-American, draft pick, lead the team in rushing, 1,500 yards, whatever. If you're an offensive lineman, you better be all Big Ten All-American, D lineman, all Big Ten All-American. I mean, you gotta have a career year. You gotta take it seriously. Cause again, I don't know how on earth you're supposed to lead from the sideline. I don't know how you're supposed to lead when you don't play, or you don't do anything, or, everybody, you eat the team meal, and then you warm up, and then you just stand there on the sideline and you play 5 plays. Like, I don't know how you do that. And I don't know how people are supposed to respond to you. And maybe I'm just different. Maybe I grew up, with AJ Hawk and guys, that they're out there, and they grade the highest in the game every week. They're the most productive guys. They're the best guys on and off the field. I had, Will Smith was a captain. Tim Anderson was a captain. Nate Sally was a captain. Mangold was a captain. Nugent was a captain. And we had guys that weren't good captains, guys that weren't productive. And it's a lot harder for your voice to be heard when you're not producing, when you're out there stinking it up on the field, or you're not even on the field. So again, and that might just be me. That might just be, get off my lawn guy. But I think it's really important, if they name you captain, you have to have an all Big Ten season. Like, that's almost non-negotiable in my head, because it's, you have to lead from the front. You can't lead from the sideline or from the bench or whatever. But that's just my opinion. That's a great question, Dave. I appreciate that. Any other questions, guys? You guys always have some good stuff. Yeah, and again, Odysseus, this is something that I think is a theme on BuckeyeScoop.com. We've talked about it a lot. I mean, Mike Hall and Tyleek are just really productive when they play, but they barely play. Nevada, do you think that changes this year, especially with Tyleek? I mean, Tyleek had like 6.5 sacks his freshman year, and like, people thought he was going to be the next Big Daddy Wilkinson. Probably not that good. He's not as athletic as Big Daddy. I mean, obviously Big Daddy's a one-of-one kind of guy, but what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think that this is the year these two guys are finally the dudes in the middle for Ohio State?
No doubt. And I think that's definitely Ohio State's plan as well. And, they've kind of dedicated themselves to, conditioning and getting them doing their part in terms of making sure that their stamina and their fitness is at a level that they can play them more. And I know Ohio State, planning on making those two guys the anchors. And then the only question is going to be is, who are the who are the Part B guys that come in and give them, spells so they can, take some time off, because you do run those hockey lines on the defensive line. But no, they're definitely going to be stalwarts. They're going to see a lot more activity, and as a result, I think our defensive line production is going to be a lot more robust this year in 2023, and that's a big reason why I'm picking the defense to take a huge step forward.
Yeah, I think that Larry being forced to play his best players now, because you delete that top layer of guys that nice guys, but not very productive. I thought Zach Harrison was fantastic last year, but on the interior, I thought Tyleek and Mike were our most disruptive. And again, the way I grade defensive linemen is how hard are they to block. Like if I'm if I'm looking through the eyes of Carson Hinzman at center, who do I want to go against? Do I want to go against Jerron Cage, or do I want to go against a guy like Tyleek? I mean, I don't want to see Tyleek. I mean, Tyleek's explosive, good hands, different level. And that's, how I always judge guys. Like when I played, Quinn Pitcock was a different level than any other defensive tackle that I ever played against at Ohio State. He was strong, played with just exceptional leverage. I mean, the guy was always about 2 inches off the ground. Impossibly strong. Like a guy that, and not upper body, but his lower body was just, it was just so impressive. Like he could squat, almost 700 pounds. I mean, he was just a different cat. There weren't guys like Quinn that were out there. And I remember Olin Kreutz, the center for the Bears, when I was in Chicago, he asked me, we were getting ready week 1 to play the Colts. He asked me why Quinn retired. Like Quinn, after 1 year, like got addicted to video games, retired or whatever, or quit football. And I had no idea, because I didn't know about the video game thing at that time. And he was like, man, he's really good. And I was like, yeah, I know. I played against him in practice, and he was, I mean, there's some guys that are like vacations. Like there's some guys I'd go against and I'd look down and see that was the guy that was in the B gap, and I was going to double team, and I knew I was going to launch him into orbit because I was going to hit him so hard. And then there's guys like Quinn where you're lucky if you can move him a foot, that's like a victory. Some of these guys, you're going to put him into the parking lot, and we did that a lot. But Quinn wasn't one of those guys. So, I love. You know what? Yeah, that's a good question. So, who can I bring in? Yeah, I think I might bring Chimdi Chekwa on, because Chimdi wants to come on the show. So bring a DB on, talk a little bit about some of the DB stuff, some of the leverage stuff. Again, I'm offensive lineman. I know enough to be dangerous about secondary play, some of the off man stuff. But if you bring Chimdi on, he knows that like the back of his hand, a lot like how I know and study offensive line play. I've never had a passion to really know secondary play, just because it wasn't my discipline and it wasn't something I ever really truly cared about. But as I develop in this, like a guy like Chimdi, I think would be a great guy to interview. So I'm gonna reach out to Chimdi, I'll get him on here for you guys. Go through some of that stuff. It's funny. Do you guys follow the hockey program? Well, that's not really the men's hockey. Women's hockey we do. They're first in the country. That's a great question. Do you follow the hockey program at all? They need to get the girls a nicer rink, man. Good Lord.
Yeah, the women's program's a juggernaut right now, man. That thing was everything was in the trash, and Coach Muserall has really taken that thing and put it at the top of the hockey world. All the credit in the world to her. So that's a really fun program to watch. And if you haven't watched women's hockey too, completely different product than like women's basketball or something else. That's like, women's hockey is really entertaining. Like you're not allowed to check, but there's a lot of body contact, so the game's a lot more open skating. Very high pace, lots of shots, and it's a very very entertaining, aesthetically pleasing type of game to watch. And I hardly endorse watching women's hockey if you get a chance to.
Yeah, I watched obviously the Olympics, the year the Team USA beat Canada. That was unbelievable. They beat them in a shootout. That was, one of probably the most iconic moment for Team USA hockey. But like I agree, and the fact that Ohio State is literally like they're the Georgia football of women's hockey right now. They're a juggernaut. I think they're like 28-1-1 or something like that right now. So they're really good. I hope that they keep Muzz, because Muzz is really killing her right now. Nevada, we had to take a basketball question. Dave Rice, who's one of our regulars, appreciate you, my man. Candidates for the OSU basketball job. Well, I mean, here's the hard part. We can do hypotheticals where we act like we're the athletic director, but when you just extended a guy, you're not going to move on him. You can't. I mean, unless you want to buy him out for $10 million. I mean, we just had to take out a loan to cover our lack of money we made in the COVID year from the rest of the university, like $48 million. So I can't see us buying out Chris Holtmann. I know that the morale around the program is as low as it's ever been. When I didn't even realize we were playing Michigan today, and I noticed it at like almost halftime, and I put up a game thread, and there was like 5 posts on our board. Our board is dominated by football, so it's always one of those interesting deals. Nevada, your thoughts on the coaching search, maybe in a year or so for Ohio State basketball, if he doesn't get it turned around?
Yeah, you're just trapped. You've already extended the guy, so we're kind of pot committed to him. And, look, he needs to recruit better. I mean, college basketball is all about recruiting. You got to recruit better. You got to get better players, because better players. And the problem is you get a good player and then they're one and done. So, Ohio State's kind of in a conundrum right now. So we could talk all afternoon about possible names, but the reality is it's going to be Holtmann, for the foreseeable future. And frankly, when we got him, he was the young hot guy in coaching. So we felt lucky to have him. So I'm not sure where you go, because college basketball is a mess. I sure hope college football doesn't become like college basketball, because much like you, the fact that today there was an Ohio State Michigan game on it, and I had a choice between watching the Ohio State Michigan game or going to Coffee Bean and getting a bagel and an ice blended. And I want you to know I went and got the bagel and the ice blended, and I didn't watch the game.
I mean, it's, I went and got a workout in, hung out with my kids, fixed some of my podcast stuff. Like, again, it's just the morale is so low. We were favored the other night against Wisconsin. We got blown out. Lose up to Ann Arbor again. And again, like I watched some of the Wisconsin game. I watched a little bit of the Michigan game. And I just don't see the effort. I don't see the grit. I don't see the toughness. I don't see guys. It's like the guys are just kind of mailing it in. Like they're kind of too cool for school. Nevada, in your dream world, who would you wish to be hired as our next head coach?
Okay, I'm going to give you a name. You guys are going to be ready for. I'm going Thad Matta. Thad Matta, former Ohio State coach. Bring him back. Bring back the glory days. Bring back the Daquan Cook, Mike Conley, Greg Oden one more time to see if he's got the magic in him one more time for one great magic recruiting class. That's who I'm going with.
That would be something. I thought you were going to do the super wild Jay Wright, which is people on our board say we need to go get Jay Wright. I was like, I don't know if we can afford Jay Wright right now, but especially if we got a $48 million loan going out from the university. But I mean, Thad is a guy that I thought got done wrong, same as Trussell. Ultimate gentleman. I mean, there wouldn't be a thing in the universe that would rally the former players more than bringing Thad back. He's one of the most beloved coaches in all of Ohio State history. Was always great to me. Always enjoyed being around him. Great dude. But be interesting. I threw some Brandon Innes on here to wrap this thing up. You must be going so hot they got the cop cars out there. So, but any final thoughts about? I'll wrap this thing up. We just hit an hour. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Leave us a like as always. But any final thoughts about it? We'll crank this one out.
No, just spring ball is going to be great, and it's going to be interesting to see the line rotations. Just talking about the line rotations today has really got my creative juices going, and I can't wait to see how they kind of mix and match and who the guys are that step up in terms of. I think that's going to be one of the really, really fun battles of the spring, along with with the safeties and the quarterback derby as well. So yeah, I can't wait for spring football to kick off, and it's going to be right around the corner. It's going to be here before we know it.
Yeah, I can't wait either. Well, we're going to wrap this thing. Appreciate you guys as always. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to get my backdrop squared up. I got a little brick city right now, but we're going to have something really splashy and cool. So appreciate you guys tuning in. If you could leave us a like on your way out the door, appreciate it. Comment who needs to step up in spring ball. We got a lot of battles brewing. A lot of information came out last week. Digested it, kind of spit it out for you guys. I think there's some really good stuff that's going to be happening. Spring ball is less than a month away. If you want the best inside coverage of Ohio State football, BuckeyeScoop.com. We are going to be having some new inside information coming out this week. Can't wait to tell you about it. It'll be a blast. So the basketball blues will slowly be going away as spring football cranks up. That's what we all are here for. We got a big quarterback derby, big O-line derby, a lot of stuff happening. Brian Hartline calling the offense now. It's going to be fantastic. So appreciate you guys as always. So thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you. We, again, if you are following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. Those are always huge. They help people find our show. So thank you guys. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit that alert button as well. If you enjoy our live content, we love having you guys on here with us. You guys ask fantastic questions. We love it, going back and forth with you guys. You guys are the best. So as always, thank you, Buckeye Nation. Thank you, Scoop family. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Go Bucks.